Hi, guys, and welcome back to Mental Fitness with Neha, the workout for your mind. Well, on today's show, we have a really special and talented guest. And so please say hi to Zuni Chopra. Thank you so much for being here. She is a 19-year-old Indian author, best known for her novel, The House That Spoke. She's authored two books of poetry as well. And she's also an exceptional student who's studying creative writing at Stanford. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It sounds very nice when you say it like that.
I'm really excited, and I think we have a lot to talk about and discuss today. So, one of the main purposes of this show is to, tell stories of people who do what they love and how they found it. Because I believe that when you do something that you love and you have like a higher purpose, then it helps you stay mentally happy, and it just gives you a drive in life. So I think you found that through writing. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you found that sense of mission through writing. So how did you always know you wanted to be an author? How did your journey start? Yeah.
Well, I always knew that I was interested in writing because ever since I was a kid, I loved I would use those Playmobil like figures and make stories with them, and I would write like these little dumb poems. I once got out of trouble in a class because I wrote a poem. It was great. It was fabulous. But I think that I didn't really know that that was what I wanted to do until I wrote my novel, The House That Spoke. I think that was kind of when I knew that it was more than just like something that I enjoyed doing. I think that it was kind of a career that I wanted to have. And I think that that's kind of that was the moment that I sort of realized. And I think I genuinely believe that you don't really know whether you want to do something as a career until you've worked really hard at it. And I think that if you give it kind of all that you have and you really, really push yourself and you find yourself really enjoying that and kind of relishing that, then that's when you know that it is something that gives you fulfillment, not just, that kind of keeps you going or something to strive for, but it has to fulfill you. I think that's very important. And I think that that was when I kind of found that, yes, writing does bring me fulfillment because at that point, that was the hardest thing I'd ever worked on, I think, in my life up until then. After that is a different story. But up until then, and I think that kind of really made an impact. And I think that's kind of what I knew.
So you kind of enjoyed the process and not only the end result. Like that's when you kind of you enjoy the process of writing itself rather than the glamour of having a book out there and that idea.
I think so. I think you have to with anything that you do, because the fact is there's a very, very real possibility that nobody could read your book. It's very, and you kind of have to assume that even if nobody read your book, you'd still be happy at having written it and at what you've done. It can't be just about kind of the end result, I think, for me.
Yeah, this is a very less known story, but in fact, I think I told you this at one point in time, but I had come for your book launch, your very first book launch at Crossword Kemp's Corner. I think it was probably 2-3 years ago. I don't know exactly when. And I had seen you, like, I think obviously that was the launch, so you were there on stage, and I was so fascinated. And I think that is when I decided to write my first book. Like, I'm honestly telling you, that's a real story which no one knows. So you've also inspired, I think when you do what you love, you inspire a lot of people along the way without trying to do that. And I think that's amazing. Yeah.
I can't tell you how much that means to me. I mean, you told me this when we spoke in the panel together, and you told me this, and I have not forgotten it since then. I was like, the fact that I put that book out, I mean, the idea that I could have inspired somebody else to do what I love to do was just so kind of touching and such a big thing for me. So thank you for that. That's amazing.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so as an author, I think it takes a lot of courage to put yourself out there and be vulnerable, because you're writing at this point as we're talking, someone could be out there reading your book. And I think what you write is, it's very vulnerable, right? So how do you deal with the entire what people think of you angle? And, especially at this age and plus with the internet and things like that, people don't think much before commenting. So how do you overcome that fear of, putting yourself out there?
Well, I think writing is always a very vulnerable thing, but I think you have to believe enough in what you're writing that it makes it worth it. Neil Gaiman is one of my favorite authors. He said that in order to write, you have to do the equivalent of being willing to walk down the street naked. So it is you're literally kind of, it's a very vulnerable process, but I think you have to believe that it's a story that has a reason for being told, and that kind of you just need to put out there, whether it kind of whether it's difficult or not. And I think that when you believe enough in that story and in what it embodies, whether that's adventure or spirit or romance or magic or whatever it is that you want people to believe in again, I think that when you put that story out there and you see it have, even if only one person reads it, that's honestly enough for me. And like I said, even if nobody reads it, it will always inevitably have a transformative impact on you, the creator. And I think that that's why the process is so important. It's because it's about you as well. So of course it's a very vulnerable thing, but you kind of have to be. I think the key to do that, to doing that, is to having a story that you really believe in, and that's the only way to kind of be able to put it out there. And, also I think I've been blessed in the sense that I've kind of learned from an early age to cultivate some grains of salt when it came to other people's opinions, and to just be like, that doesn't make
how do you do that? What's the mental process behind that?
I think that you just have to, and it's very difficult for me even now. Like sometimes I feel that someone had said something, nasty about me, and I'm like, why? I was so nice to you. Like, what did I do wrong? But I think I read this quote, probably on Instagram, honestly, or somewhere, that was like, if you wouldn't take advice from them, then you shouldn't take criticism from them either. And I think that's a really good quote. Again,
Yeah.
I have no clue who said it. I just saw it on one of those, those inspirational quote accounts, which are normally so dumb and cheesy. But in this case, I was like, wait a minute, that makes a lot of sense. Why am I taking these people's opinions so seriously? If I don't care about anything else they have to say, why would I care about what they have to say about me? And I think that's kind of really important to keep in mind, that people who love you will never kind of want to hurt you in the way that other people's opinions can. And I think that a lot of these opinions are just born out of jealousy and spite, in which case it definitely says more about them than it does about you, and it is more their problem than yours. So I think it's kind of keeping all of these things in mind, while also having the kind of self-confidence and love to be like, yeah, some people see me that way, but I don't really, those aren't people whose opinions or who as people really matter to me, so it's okay.
No, I love what you said, that it says more about them than about you. Yeah, that's a really interesting.
Definitely it does. But it took me a while to realize. Took me a while to figure out, but it does.
Okay. So aside from being an author, you are also studying at Stanford, as we mentioned. So to get into that kind of a college, having gone through the process myself, you need to really put in the work, stay focused, and be driven. So I think you have this entire hunger for life in you, which I find really inspiring. Like you're a go-getter. You can say it like that. What fuels you? What drives you to do all this?
Well, I guess that, one thing that drives me is my mom. And that is in a very literal sense, because she really kind of cultivated the discipline in me. And until I kind of had it organically, she really just pushed me. Like throughout all of 7th grade, she was like, come on, please, like work.
7th grade.
And I also think she leads by example a lot, because my mom is like, she works harder than anybody I know, and she loves what she does. It's not even just working hard as in like, kind of like grueling. She loves, like, she wakes up on Monday mornings, she's like, happy Monday, everyone, which really but it's because she loves what she does so much that she has to be told to slow down, to just calm down, don't it's okay. But and I think that's always very inspiring, that she led by example like that. So that's one thing that drives me. And I guess another thing is that I really think, and again, my parents have really kind of embodied this, that you have to have, like you said, you have to have something you're striving towards to really feel happy and fulfilled. I just don't think that you could be if you were just not aiming for anything or striving for some kind of excellence in whatever it is that you love or whatever it is that you want to do. And that doesn't necessarily need to be like a pretentious kind of excellence, but just in whatever field it is that you love, you've got to be trying for something. I genuinely believe that, and I genuinely think that I kind of have always tried to do that. Have always tried to have something that I was going towards, something that I was aiming for, and I think like I think for me, the idea of having opportunities is a pretty big one. I really kind of see opportunities as like, I have to kind of leverage this opportunity if I have it. So I really kind of go for opportunities. And I think that's a big kind of shift in worldview, and that's something I would definitely recommend, especially to other students, is that when you stop seeing it as, oh, this, could be difficult, or this could be a lot of work, and you start seeing it instead as like, just leveraging opportunities. If you see an opportunity, go for it. And I think
so it's not like you have to do it, it's like you get to do it.
Yeah,
like that.
I guess that too. Yeah, definitely that kind of shift in idea that a lot of times I did things where I was like, oh my God, this is going to be so much work. But at the same time, I was like, but this is going to be a great opportunity. And this is going to lead to more of this, is going to open doors, So it kind of, when you start chasing these things that you love and when you start chasing excellence and opportunities, it just keeps growing. And it isn't like an instantaneous switch. Like you can't just wake up you have to like push yourself at first, but eventually it's like, it's like pushing something down a hill. At first you're pushing it, but then eventually it just kind of starts going, gaining momentum.
And I think once you get like some sort of accomplishments or some results that you see, that drives you further. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and it could definitely be your own like joy. Like that's also a big result that you might not even notice at first. Like it might take a couple of while for you to be like, wait a minute, this is really making me happy. And then of course, you're motivated to keep doing it.
Makes sense. Love that answer. Okay, so given that you've already, you've accomplished quite a bit. So do you feel insecure or anxious having to live up to expectations as such? Is there any pressure? And if there is it external or self-imposed?
There's less pressure than people think, because I do get the question a lot that, is there pressure, and do you like just because of what you've already achieved, what your parents have already achieved? But I don't think there is kind of any pressure in the sense of like, because I'm trying to live up to something. I don't think there's any. There can, I guess, sometimes, but very rarely, because writing was something that I was drawn to so naturally that it never felt like I was pressurized into it. And so it never felt like there should be any pressure on what I wrote. And I think that there might be self-imposed pressure and, self-imposed insecurities and things, of course. But I mean, I think a lot of people have that. And I think that's something that we all have to grapple with. And I think that I'm on that route of, kind of addressing those and working with them and working and pushing past them. But I think that, like you said, writing is all about being vulnerable. I think a lot of life is about being vulnerable, and a lot of us have those kind of insecurities. Nobody doesn't. I mean, if somebody tells you that they're insecure about no part of themselves, they're probably not, honestly. But I think it's important to kind of learn how to love yourself beyond just those voices that are like, oh, this part of you is bad, or this part of you is not that great, things like that, and to recognize, how amazing you probably are, because honestly everybody is amazing. I don't get why, like, some people are like, oh, I'm insecure about this, and I'm always like, why? You should, like, you're great, like, you shouldn't be.
Okay, yeah, I get that. Yeah. So as you said, this insecurity, everyone has it. Everyone has some degree of insecurity, so you can never entirely like eliminate it, I guess. But is there any way you silence it? Like, what do you tell yourself? Is there something you say to yourself to silence that voice, put it on the back burner or something like that?
I think you kind of have to sort of, just kind of learn to, I think, love yourself for who you are instead of who you're not. And I think it's really important to kind of look in the mirror every day and like just be like, I'm great, like, I'm awesome. Those kind of self affirmations, and learning to kind of look at yourself as a really great, just a really great individual. And I think everybody has parts of themselves that they like, and I think it's just important to focus on those parts and to kind of not just say that, it's very easy to say, oh, like, love yourself for who you are, but it's a lot more difficult to actually do that, because you always have this voice being like, oh, this is wrong, this is wrong. I would say that there are a lot of assumptions, I think, underneath a lot of these insecurities that are just plain wrong. The assumption of what is beautiful, what is good, what is productive, what is lazy, what is right, and what is wrong. And a lot of those assumptions might just be plain wrong. And I think it's important to kind of question those. So don't just be like, no, I'm perfect, and kind of push it away, because then you're not really addressing what's underneath it. Be like, why am I so adamant to feel this way about myself? What is it that has made me, what is it that has made me doubt this part of myself? And kind of really get to the root of that. There's a lot of great mental health resources to do that, including therapists. But I also think it's important for yourself to kind of, see yourself maybe as others see you. Like, nobody else, I think, speaks to us as harshly as we speak to ourselves. Again, if they do, they're probably not.
That's very interesting. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So like, just be real with yourself is what you're saying.
I think so. Don't just take these insecurities at a face level, because there's normally some kind of assumption underneath them that you can combat pretty easily when it comes up. Like, especially because a lot of people are like, if they don't work, they're like, oh, am I being lazy? And that happens to me all the time. Like, if I take an evening off, I'm like, can I really afford to take this evening off? But it's like, what would you say to somebody else in that same situation? You would say, yeah, take a week off. You've worked hard enough. So why is it different for yourself? Like I think it's important to kind of not just kind of push them away, but really question them and like force them to explain themselves. And you'll find out they don't really have an explanation.
Yeah, so get to the root of your insecurities and a lot of healthy self-talk. Okay, so that's how we deal with. Yeah, really like that concept. Yeah. Makes sense. Okay, so now coming to I think when you come from a background of privilege, that comes with its own price. Sometimes it can get overwhelming, etc. So how do you stop overthinking? And in your stories or as yourself as a person, how do you stay authentic to yourself?
I think authenticity is something that that runs in the family. I think that my parents have both been always very authentic to themselves, as is my brothers, my cousins. Like everybody is really authentic. I think, and I'm very grateful to grow up around people like that. And even my friends. I mean, my best friend is probably one of the most authentic people I know. So I think that it never occurred to me to not be authentic. I think that I, from a young age, had a very strong sense of individuality and of being who I was, even if other people didn't like it. And so I think that is one way to kind of address it. I think that in terms of, it's easy to get overwhelmed. I think it's also just because there's a bit of a spotlight on you at times, which can be quite, negative. But I think that's kind of just comes with the, it just comes with with how you were born, and maybe you did nothing to deserve those negative comments. That's definitely true, but it's also true that I've done nothing to deserve the financial stability, the connections, the influence that I'm given just by being somebody's daughter. That's not fair. I didn't earn that. So I think it's just about, it's not really about being like, oh, this is so unfair, because I mean there's pros and cons, and it comes as a package. I think it's just about learning to deal with it and recognizing, like I said, self-value, and being like, I don't really care what these random people on the internet have to say, or I don't really care that, I can't act because I can't. But, so I think that it's just about, and recognizing, like I just said, being authentic to yourself, like being like, wait, I've never wanted to act. Like that's never been something that's interested me. So I think it's important to do both at once, to stay true to yourself, because staying true to yourself helps combat this kind of pressure, and to combat this pressure because that helps to stay true to yourself. So it's kind of like a whatever the opposite of a vicious cycle is, a positive cycle,
Yeah,
a wholesome cycle, if you will.
I think that's a very interesting way to look at it. What you said right now, that like there are cons, agreed, but there are also so many pros. Yeah, so you just take it as it is, and okay, yeah, makes sense. Right. So you've written 3 stories so far. Like counting the novel and poems. Is there an overarching message through your writing? Like, is there a message you're trying to convey through all that you write and all that you do? Why do you write? Why do you do what you do?
Why do I write is a very good question. I write because I find fulfillment in it, and because I find real joy in the impact that stories have both on me and on the world around me, whether it's as a reader or it's as the person who creates them. I just think that writing is an art form that really has an impact, um, like I said, both on me and on other people. And it really kind of brings me fulfillment. It brings me joy, and it feels like something um, that gives, my hard work meaning. And I think that's all any of us really want at the end of the day, is for us to have meaning. And I guess there's not really one universal message. I kind of just let people take the messages that they will, but I do really believe in the stories that I tell. So I hope that people take something from them, no matter what it is, just something positive. Whether it's, I don't know, they see the world with a little more wonder. I think that's definitely one thing that I'm always kind of going for. Even in my last book, that was The Island of the Day Before, which was a collection of poems and short stories. It was basically the theme that ran through all of them was the idea of the modern fairy tale. And the reason that I wrote that is because I really wanted to just give people that sense of wonder again. I think so many people have lost that in today's times. So I guess that's a big one for me. But, I just kind of write stories that I think, deserve, in my view, to be told. And hopefully other people will think they deserve to be read or listened to.
Yeah. Okay. So coming to it's a special segment of the show. It's called the happy place. Okay. So I believe that all of us have, it's either like a person, a place, a ritual, something that we do that we go to, which just lights us up. So if you are an emotional low, you have a happy place. And it's not only a place, it could, as I said, be a personal ritual. So what is your happy place? What lights you up?
Really good question. I think I would say kind of two things. I would say the first thing would be kind of loved ones and friends and family. I think that's big for me in my life, and I think I'm really blessed to have incredible people that I can call family and friends. And I think that just interacting with them and being with them always kind of makes me feel better. And I'd say the second one is the moon, which is an interesting one for sure. But I've always
Yeah.
felt like looking at the moon gives me a real sense of kind of calm and peace. And maybe that's a bit of just like, I think it would be confirmation bias because my name means moonlight. So I've always felt a real kind of connection to the moon. But I do think that looking at it always brings me a real sense of peace and a real sense of calm and a real sense of, of sort of quiet joy, I think.
Very interesting. The moon is one of the more unique answers I've heard on the show. Yeah. Okay. So coming to the last question. Right. So, this is one question which I ask every guest that comes on the show. And so let's say that, your life so far till today has taught you something. Like all your experiences, everything you've gone through has taught you something. What is one absolute mental fitness truth you live by? It could be a quote, a thought, a truth that you really live by. Yeah, what would that be? You could give 2, 3 if one is too much pressure, but yeah.
I would guess one big one is trust yourself. I think that's a big one. And I think that all forms, whether that's in terms of self-doubt or in terms of, something like we talked about, something that another person has said, or even if it's like your gut just tells you that something isn't right, or you just don't feel like you're ready for something, or you just don't feel like someone is right for you. I think that it is really important to trust yourself. And I think that's very difficult because a lot of times with things like insecurities, with things like self-doubt on a much larger scale, which I think is probably has been one of my biggest problems. It's very difficult to, because it requires a lot of confidence, I think, trusting yourself. It requires the confidence in saying that, I'm putting my whole life in my own hands, basically. And with that kind of big sense of responsibility comes so many doubts that, oh, what if I mess it up? What if that's not right? What if this is not right? But I really think that it is important for everybody to cultivate a really good relationship with that inner voice and to really have a trust in their own sort of, not just gut decisions, but decisions as a whole, and what you see in the world and how you approach things. Really just have that trust in yourself that, first of all, that I can do this. And second of all, that, those insecurities kind of are washed away, I think, when you really find that self-trust. And definitely a big one, like I said, when you just think that something isn't right for you, or when you just have that sense that this isn't what I want, or this is what I want, alternatively, I think that developing a trust in yourself is probably one of the most important things that you could do throughout anybody's life. And I think it's important for every single person to have.
Trust yourself. I think that's very simple and yet like very hard hitting and impactful. Yeah. I think that's a very interesting mental fitness to live by. And I think this entire conversation that we've had is something which is going to benefit a lot of people. I hope that they take away, there's so much to cover, honestly, so they can take away, as you said, each person takes away something that is a reflection of where they are at that point in their life. So thank you so much once again for being on the show. And yeah, it's really fun talking to you. Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to hear it.